Please know that I tried by BiMoonPhases. Halloween 1981. People said that when you died, your whole life flashed before your eyes in mere seconds. What nobody told you was the million thoughts exploding in your head the instant you realized you were about to die. All jumbled up, but crystal clear, all together, but distinct at the same time. James's first thought when he had opened the cottage door only to find himself in front of a raised wand clutched in a very white hand had immediately been one. Please no, I didn't get to love them for long enough. Then, I left my wand on the table. After that, they can still make it. I'll hold them off, somehow. Then again, as long as Lily and Harry are safe. The next thought hit him like a punch in the stomach. If we don't survive, they're gonna frame Sirius for this. And then another hit him like a knife to the heart. Pete. The memories were running around his mind, occupying that second before he knew the cloaked figure would open his mouth with a clarity he had never experienced. He smiled politely, as he had been taught, but the other boy didn't look up from the table filled with teacups and his mother's best tea sweets. "Another cup, Mrs. Pettigrew," his mother smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Potter." The woman looked as shy as her son, but James knew no one was uncomfortable for a long time in his parents' presence. Mr. Pettigrew had already been whisked away by his father to his office to discuss something surely boring about their jobs. "James, dear." "Yes, Mom." "Why don't you take Peter to your Quidditch pitch and you can play there for a while?" That caught the attention of the other boy, who finally looked up from his plate. "You have a whole Quidditch pitch?" he whispered, wide eyes. James nodded, grinning. "It's small because it's for kids, but it's very fun. Do you like Quidditch?" Peter's eyes lit up. "I love it." They had played together until sunset for the first time that day, until Peter's parents called him home, and had been the first time they had met, the Pettigrews eager for their son to have at least a friend from another wizarding family nearby. "Are you excited for tomorrow?" James asked. They were lying on the Potter's back garden, the light of that 31st of August slowly fading. "What if the Slytherins make fun of me?" Peter had whispered. I only have hand-me-down robes, and I hear they're all rich and nasty." "I'm sure there must be some good Slytherins." James reached for Peter's hand and squeezed it. "And we'll be together. But what if I don't end up in Gryffindor like you?" "You will, Pete. I know you will. It's you and me until the end, remember?" In a sense, it would be now. Peter and him until the end. But nothing like his innocent 11-year-old self would have ever imagined. "I'm glad we got the compartment all to ourselves." Peter smiled for the first time since they had walked on platform 9 3/4 to catch the Hogwarts Express that morning. "The train ride is long. Maybe we could go meet some people, make some new friends." James stopped waving to his parents when the train pulled out of the station. "Maybe later, but I don't really want to see anyone else yet," Peter sighed. James smiled and nodded, and was about to ask if he wanted to try some spell from their brand new Charms school books when the compartment door opened, letting in a kid with dark hair and an elegant posture. You don't have a whole family in Slytherin, do you?" he asked, his posh accent evident in the whole sentence. "Definitely not." James laughed, while Peter shook his head, frowning at the stranger. Great, exactly what I'm looking for. The kid sat by James's side. I'm Sirius Black. James shook James shook his hand, shooting a quick glance at Peter, who didn't look too pleased their solitude had been interrupted. Sirius. Sirius, his partner in crime, his best friend. James had tried. He really had tried to never play favorites between the Marauders, but from that first moment on the Hogwarts Express, it had been clear that Sirius was like the brother he had never had, something that Peter never managed to be. He had always been afraid to ask Peter how he felt about it. So now he had the answer, apparently. We need a name, James interrupted on his bed. I guarantee you, next year we'll cause even more mischief. We'll prank even more Slytherins, and we need a name. Yes, Peter clapped from his own bed. Any ideas? Wouldn't that make us more likely to get caught? Remus asked from where he was placing yet another book in his trunk. It's going to be some sort of code name, right, James? Sirius got up from his bed. Sirius got up and jumped on James's bed. They'll know the name, but they'll never know who behind it. We'll be raiding the halls in the castle, and none will be the wiser. The word maraud is an old synonym for raid. What about something similar? Remus asked. I love it. Trust our favorite bookworm to find us something appropriate, Sirius exclaimed. James nodded, as always wondering how two people so different in everything, like Remus and Sirius, seemed to get along that well. What about Marauders? He asked. Marauders, the Marauders. That's brilliant, James, Peter said. The Marauders. Hogwarts was still marked by their presence. By those glorious 7 years, they had managed to ignore the war looming closer and just live. Would the students coming after them, the pranksters of the future, they had imagined so many times to know the Marauders had been destroyed from the within? Tell me again you're okay with this. Tell me, or I'll never talk to you again. James put his hand on Sirius's shoulder, trying to calm him down. Of course I am, he said soothingly. It's our Remus. He is our friend, and nothing he is will ever change that. Besides, if Dumbledore let him come to Hogwarts, they are surely doing everything to keep him and everyone else safe. Sirius nodded, a bit calmer now. We need to tell him that we know, he said. We need to know. We need him to know we love him, even if he has a very little problem. James laughed. Of course we'll have. We'll tell him as soon as he comes back from the library, he nodded. But we need to tell Pete first. The Marauders act as one. Sirius nodded, and James patted his shoulder, only to turn around when the door to the dorm opened slowly, revealing a frowning Peter. Tell me what? He said slowly. If he had to be honest, in those microseconds he had all the time in the world to be. Peter hadn't always been happy with his and Sirius's close friendship. He had noticed it from time to time, and had done his best to make things right for him. The last of which was only some mere months ago, with a heartbreaking mistake to try and reach for someone who'd been long gone already. So, James looks up at Peter, sitting in the bed across from him. What do you think? You're sure that the wolf won't end up eating us? Peter frowned. He would if we were human, for sure, but if we're animal form, he won't. And we won't be, and he won't be lonely anymore. He might even stop hurting himself so much. It will be really hard. I know, but it is for our Remus. I really want to find a way to help him, don't you? Of course I want to help him, James, Peter rolled his eyes. It doesn't make becoming an illegal animagus any easier. James smiled, patting Peter on the shoulder. Don't worry, Pete. Both Sirius and I will help you with it. You'll manage just fine. He jumped off the bed. Sirius is already working on it in the library. He's doing most of the work. You'll just have to follow the instructions. Maybe that had been the breaking point. Going through everything to keep Remus company during the full moon, only to find out his animagus form was a rat, of all things. They had needed someone small to freeze the Whomping Willow, but there had been a lot of animals small enough, which weren't rats. Rats. Right in this moment, it was hilarious. Sirius would have laughed hysterically at the thought that the rat they had been looking for the past months in the Order had been the actual rat. James hadn't been able to let go of Sirius's hands since the moment his mother had finally levitated him to the bed in the guest room. His legs bandaged and his eyes closed thanks to the sleeping draught. He could have gone to sleep now that he knew Sirius was safe, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to walk out of that room. None of them were. Remus had flew there as soon as he'd learned, and Peter had run up the street as quickly as possible. Now Remus was lying on the bed as well, his arms carefully around Sirius's waist, his face buried in Sirius's neck, and Peter was sitting on the carpet by James's side. "What happens now?" he asked in a whisper. "He's staying here." "Of course, but what about when his parents come to take him back?" "They won't this time, Pete, and he's staying here permanently." "You mean living with you?" "Exactly. We're at Hogwarts most of the year, but he'll come here with me during the holidays, during the breaks. My parents already love him like a son. He'll fit right into our family." There was a moment of silence. Then Peter squeezed his shoulder. "He's lucky to have you," he smiled. "We all are." His family. They had been his family since first year and up until now, up until that knock on the door. Maybe he hadn't been clear enough. Maybe he should have stayed closer to Pete. Maybe if he had loved him better, none of this would have happened. None of this would be about to happen. James was sitting on the couch in the common room, Peter by his side, and James sprawled over the carpet with Remus's head on his lap. Their tones were hushed, careful not to have someone overhear their latest pranks they were doing. "Up to something as always, Potter," a voice said behind him. His heart jumped in his throat, as always, as he turned to look at Lily, her arms crossed over her chest. But she was smiling, and James thought that after all those years he would never get used to her looking at him with something other than disdain in her expression. And yet, here they were. "Lils," he smiled back. She moved around the couch, perching on the armrest. "Anything I don't need to know?" she asked. "As always," he nodded. She rolled her eyes and passed a hand in his hair. "What did I do wrong to fall in love with you?" she sighed. He carefully passed an arm around her waist and moved her to his lap, putting a strand of red hair back behind their ears. Have you ever considered that we might be soulmates?" he asked. "That we had no choice other than to fall in love with each other. That since the moment we were born, there had been a place in our lives for each other that no one else could have filled." He saw her blush before he let go and kissed her, reveling in the fact that he was now able to kiss the love of his life whenever she wanted. He almost didn't feel Peter get up from the couch. When he had finally got on with Lily, They had spent most of their time together, just the two of them, as if to make up for the time they had lost. As if they were trying to make up for all the time they wouldn't have. James thought as memories disappeared for a short instant, leaving the one pointed at his chest in front of him. "You're not really serious, Bronx," Peter said in a low voice. James felt Sirius open his mouth by his side but elbowed him in the ribs before he could answer. It was not the time for jokes, and the gloomy crowd of the night in the pub in Diagon Alley didn't call for it. "Don't you want to do something about this all, Pete?" he asked. "Mooney is already in the Order, away on missions to prevent werewolves from joining Voldemort's side, and me and Sirius will join as well. We can't just stay here watching as some madman tries to destroy our world as we know it." "It's dangerous." Peter's hand trembled as he clutched his pint glass. "The other side are murderous, no less. And Prongs, I don't want to doubt your heart, but seeing how things are going now, they're winning." "They won't," Sirius spat. Not until there's one of us left with air in their lungs." "I know it's dangerous," James sighed. "But you can't expect me to just wait. They will win if we just watch." "What about Lily?" Peter asked. "She's already with the Order, alongside with Marlene and Dorcas," James said. "I'm already having a hard time with my job at the ministry to support my mom now that my dad's passed away," Peter sighed. "Do you need help?" James offered. "You know you can ask me for anything, Pete." I know. Peter shook his head. "All right, I'm in." "Good." Sirius nodded. James smiled, patting Peter's shoulder. "The Marauders act as one." Had it been fear? Had he been tortured into giving them away? Even as his mind offered some escape from the truth, he knew it wasn't true. And it hurt. "Do you, James Fleeman Potter, take this woman as your wife? Do you love and cherish and protect for as long as you both shall live?" Nothing existed outside of this moment, outside of Lily's smile, a flower crown on her head, her hands in his, the summer sun shining over them. The war had stayed outside of their small little garden, just for that day, and everyone they loved had managed to be there despite it all. Sirius was sniffling behind James in that very moment as Mary wiped away tears behind Lily. Remus was in the front row, the cane he sometimes used after a bad moon in his hand, Peter by his side, Dorcas and Marlene holding hands not far from them. The only sad note was the 2 empty chairs they had left for Fleemont and Amphibia. Their pictures on their seats so they could still somehow see their son getting married. "I do," James breathed. They all took a break from the outside world that day, toasting the bride and the groom until sunset, dancing under the stars. James never let go of Lily for more than a minute, his heart bursting with joy. He said good night to his friends when Sirius announced he was taking a very tired Remus home to rest, and noticed Peter on his own by the bar, a drink in hand. He waved merrily to him and went on dancing with his wife. His parents, never seeing him get married and never meeting Harry, had always pained him. But at least he had his friends, his chosen family by his side. He wondered for an instant if his mother would be there to greet him later. The silence was heavy in the living room. By his side, Lily was rocking Harry back and forth, but her eyes were lost on something no one could see. "And Dumbledore's sure it's Harry," Sirius's voice said, barely more than a whisper. "He said there's a possibility it might be Frank's and Alice's son," James said slowly. "That's why we have to go into hiding, the 6 of us, before they can find us." "There's talk of a spy in the order," Remus said, looking up at James. "Don't tell anyone where you're going, all right? Not even us." "But," James's serious caroused, "think of your son, Bronx," Remus said. James closed his mouth, looking at the baby moving in Lily's arms. Harry chose that moment to open his eyes and start crying. Long, heartbreaking wails, as if he had somehow understood what he had been marked for. Lily kept rocking him, but to no avail. "Give him to me," Peter said soothingly, taking Harry from Lily's arms. "You're terrified. He must feel it." He rocked the baby for a bit until Harry calmed down and distracted himself by trying to grab a lock of Peter's hair. "Oh, Bambi," Peter sighed. "So young and small, and with the power to end a war." James didn't remember how that day had ended. Possibly with them starting to pack, then falling asleep on their beds, Harry snuggled between them, terrified about the fate hanging over their little son. That day Peter had been the calmest at hearing the news. Now he could see it was because he had already known. "Sirius is right," James nodded. "It's brilliant." Peter didn't say anything, looking from him to Sirius, then to Lily with Harry in her arms. "We know someone has been telling the Death Eaters more and more of the others' plans lately," Sirius went on, gritting his teeth. "If Bronx and Lily disappear, they will think immediately I'm their secret keeper. Potter and Black. It's always been like that." "It has," Peter nodded. "This is why, if we swap, no one will ever know," Sirius went on. "You'll be safe, and they will come after me anyway, and no one will suspect you." "The perks of being insignificant, I suppose." Peter didn't leave James time to frown at the sentence before going on. "Why don't you ask your boyfriend to be secret keeper instead, Sirius? I doubt they will go after a werewolf, for all their talks of wanting them to fight on their own side." The silence fell heavy in the cottage. James and Sirius looked at each other. The memories of all the plans about werewolves being disrupted by the spy they had not been able to catch, yet flashing in James's mind. He saw Lily purse her lips and pointedly walk away, bringing Harry to the nursery. He felt awful. "Oh," Peter had apparently caught on. "So much for asking me to trust him back in school, then." James looked at Sirius, who walked over to the window and looked outside. He didn't need to see the face to know his eyes were filled with tears at the mere suspicion that Remus, their Moony, the love of Sirius's life, could be the spy. "I'll do it." James looked at Peter. "Really?" he whispered. His childhood friend just smiled. Now, feeling the spare instants running out, James wondered, did Peter wait until after they had performed the spell? Did he go home and see his mother before? Did he think about it, or had he already decided? Did he run from their home straight to Voldemort was? Did he smile when he told him? Did he feel relieved? "You don't look good, Pete," Lily smiled, giving him a cup of tea. "It's all the bad news," Peter shook his head. "There never seems to be anything even slightly positive lately." "I know," Lily sighed, sitting in the armchair right by where James was playing with Harry on the carpet. "I can't stop thinking about the McCannons." James bit the inside of his cheek, soon tasting blood. He couldn't believe it. They had lost so many people already, but somehow Marlene's loss had hurt worst so far. They kept seeing her smile everywhere in the house, kept hearing her laughter, her teasing when they were at Quidditch practice together. But Marlene was gone, and with her, her whole family as well, wiped out without a second thought. When some days after they had gotten the news that Dorcas when some days after they had gotten the news that Dorcas was dead too. He hadn't been surprised. She had gone looking for them, they had said. She had taken on so many of them out, Voldemort had to come out and kill her in person. No, that wasn't surprising. That was always going to be the way Dorcas would die, in a world without the girl she loved. I'd better go, Peter said. Peter slowly got up. Already? Lily asked. Yes, I don't think you'll see me soon, Peter said. Is everything all right? James asked. Peter looked at him, then Harry, and smiled. I'm going into hiding, he said. It will be safer this way. James nodded and got up, walking Peter to the door. Take care of yourself, all right, he said, briefly hugging him. My fellow marauder. Peter smiled and mock saluted him. Mischief managed, he said. There was no time left, and James knew it. The memories crumbled around him, leaving behind them only the sheer cold of betrayal, of dread, of not being able to save his son and the woman he loved. The hand holding the wand in front of him moved slightly, and the last of his survival instinct kicked in. Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go. Run. I'll hold him off. Thank you for watching. This is a very depressing fic, and it's just so sad, but it's so beautifully written. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, that's not really the word for it, but enjoyed nonetheless this video. As always, I will put the link in the description so you can check it out and give kudos to this amazing writer. Have a nice day.